Yeah. What's up? What's up? Welcome back to another episode of All Over Voiceover with Kiff VH. Thank you so much for joining us. I am your host, Kiff VH, and this week, All Over Voiceover is being brought to you in part by our friends over at Bookable Voice Coaching and Demos. They provide one-on-one coaching, demo production, workshops, and VO workouts. Guys, Bookable is your place to give your VO career the jumpstart or the tune-up it needs. Check them out and everything they offer at www.bookablevo.com and sign up to receive updates and get more info about how they can help make you grow. Bookable voiceover demos and coaching. Thank you so much for your support, you guys. And thank you to my amazing guest in the studio here in the Suede Blue Lounge, the lovely, the talented Miss August McLaughlin. Thank you so much for joining.
Thanks for having me, Kiff. I'm really honored to be here.
It's just great to be able to sit and talk with you in this context. You're a fellow podcaster here at Global Voice Broadcasting with your show Girl Boner. Yes. And that's how we met. I think maybe 6 months ago. God.
Yeah. So we're like podcast siblings or something.
We are. That's exactly what we are. We're it's like Hansel and Gretel.
We kind of even look like we could be siblings. We're both from the Midwest. We've got the Scandinavian sort of. Are you Scandinavian?
Yeah, Dutch. My people are Dutch.
There you go.
What's your? Are you straight up Scandinavian, or where are your people from?
I'm actually half Swedish, about a little more than a quarter Norwegian. I have a little Dutch. Yeah, so pretty darn Scandinavian. Although my mom grew up in India, so I had that influence in my life all the way from Did she grow up in there because of the war and stuff, or was it? What was my ex-wife's father was in a prison camp in, I think, Indonesia when he was 2. The family, his father was captured and the family was there. And the reason I bring that up is the family absorbed some of the cuisine into it. So it's Dutch food, but with Natsagoran, this crazy sort of mashup that's residual from the war. Totally. Actually, my grandparents were missionaries.
Oh.
And their parents were missionaries as well. And so my mom grew up in India in a little town called Assam up in the jungle. Uh-huh. She was there until she was 16. So Hindi and English and also Assamese, which was their tribal language. Yeah. She grew up speaking all of those fluently. And so she feels a lot more connected to that culture. And we grew up eating curries and, wearing saris sometimes and, listening to Bollywood music in the middle of Minnesota. It was kind of really weird, but my normal,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, that's so cool. It's just an interesting integration of those cultures into an otherwise sort of homogenized culture,
Very much so. Especially now it's become more diverse, the area that my family lives in. But at the time, and I've joked that I felt when we moved to suburbia when I was about 8 years old, that it was like Stepford Wives, walking into the sea of also very Scandinavian looking children who wore brand name clothes that all kind of looked similar. And I felt so alien to that. It was really kind of shocking. So I didn't realize until later what a gift it was to grow up with that kind of diversity, because we even thought that we were related to people in India because you call them auntie and uncle, out of just love and respect.
Right.
So they are family. I mean, we have technically quote unquote family there, just not blood relatives.
Yeah. I love that. I love the notion of the redefinition of family.
Amen.
Sherry, my wife, has one of her closest. She always referred to her as her cousin, but she's not actually blood related. She's a cousin of her cousins, but they connected. And, they're part of our family. And it was really interesting as a white, very white, Dutch, but integrating my family in with Sherry's family and becoming part of and being family. And it's, I don't know, I think it's important that we open ourselves to redefine that. Even now is I felt that traveling overseas too. I went to Sweden last year and the feeling of, redefining what it meant to be an American. You know, like I felt like an outsider until I got to pass like customs and then saw like a really diverse group of Americans who was like my countrymen.
Yeah.
You know,
yeah,
like
totally
there was an African American dude and then like, there was a couple, you know, the woman had like a red dot on her forehead. So I don't know exactly what to assume, but we all had American passports and that was what was defining us.
Yeah.
You know?
So interesting. I agree. And I think we were just talking about the artist communities and, you know, it's so interesting to me how many of my friends and peers who are fellow creatives, not all of them sadly are as accepted by their families. Yeah. You know, in other states, maybe they don't think that their career path is as legitimate because they've been cultured to believe that it's not, you know, a 9-to-5 job or whatever. Right. Or they left, you know, their countries to come here and pursue something in the arts in LA. And I think it's really amazing. I remember one Thanksgiving, my acting coach, I used to be an actress, invited all of us to this kind of, you know, I can't remember he had a great name for it, but it was basically like, we're all adopting each other as family for Thanksgiving. And it was all these artists just binding together. And I think finding your family, you know, blood and not blood is a powerful thing. Yeah, it really is. Your sort of sense of tribe. And, you know, we have a group of people we get together every Thanksgiving with and have since we got here. And they, you know, this couple, they're actors and they opened their house and they're like, come, no, we're having Thanksgiving here if you don't have a place to go. That's so nice. And then, you know, it becomes like Orphan Thanksgiving. That's what it was called. Orphan Thanksgiving. That's Which awesome. Sounds a little bit more negative than, well, I don't know. I think orphan has stigma around it. Sure. But I think I love the idea of embracing, just as your friends do. Yeah. Our home is your home. That's it. Yeah. Here we are. We're all far away from that. So who's to define what family is? Yeah. And that, you know, now it's like, do you want to go home for Thanksgiving? Well, I am. Yeah. Here I am. Right. Amen. Yeah. So I don't need to go anywhere as much as I'd love to see my relatives and my immediate family and stuff. It's like, these are my family and we've made a home here, you know? I mean, it's interesting. It's an interesting city in that it's a beacon for people who are sort of adrift or looking for places to sort of find and make their own, and especially people in this career, or you know, whether it's acting or whether it's modeling or whether it's writing or just creating. Yeah. You know, this space I read somewhere, I forget, maybe LA Weekly, I forget what it was, but it was an essay about Los Angeles as a blank canvas that doesn't care what you put on it. Oh, I love that. You know, it doesn't matter. All that it says is that come here, put your mark on it, and it's fine. It's good. Yeah. And you'll either benefit or you won't, but you know, come and try. Step up to it. Here's a paintbrush. Here's a paintball. Here's mixed media. Do what you do. Magic. Yeah. I love that. That's so interesting because I remember I lived a lot of places before I came here. Yeah. And including the place I grew up, this Los Angeles was the first place that I got to and thought, this feels like home. Yeah. And I didn't really know anybody. But I just felt that. And I think maybe it's because of that. There's this kind of open, you're welcome, be creative, be yourself. It's okay. Yeah. Yeah. What led you here? What brought you to LA? I mean, you were I'm jumping so far ahead. Let me backtrack if you're comfortable. I'd love to start with what got you out of Minnesota to go out into the, you know, into the big South. Beyond Minnesota world. Yeah. I actually grew up kind of with my head out the window the whole time, thinking I had dreams of traveling and going to these places I'd never seen. And I grew up in a big family, and our vacations were like going to the cabin on the lake. And it was a beautiful upbringing. I'm still really close to them. Yeah. But I always had this sense, maybe from my mom growing up in India, that, you know, I wanted to venture out. And I didn't know what for. But when I graduated high school, I had no idea what I wanted to do with my life. And, you know, they're asking you all these questions and you're supposed to make all these decisions. And I had been modeling a little bit because I was very involved in theater in high school. And that was such a huge part of my life. And that sort of led into an opportunity to do some local modeling. Great. So I had applied to one college at the time because I think basically my parents are so cool. They didn't like try to force me to do anything, but my dad was just kind of like, hey, just in case you need some sort of backup plan or why don't you just fill out this paper? Like I signed up for something. I don't remember what I wrote, and I was going to like take how to bake cookies or something because I had no idea.
You need to have a marketable skill.
Yes.
Even if it's baking cookies, people will eat them.
That's true.
So,
that is true. And that is inspiring. And if that had been my passion, I would have totally done that.
Absolutely.
I just had all this. It was weird. I felt like I had all this passion for nothing. Like this sort of like, I don't know where to place this. But modeling was the closest thing I'd found to, I felt like I stepped out of myself and it was like performance based, but I was very insecure, as a lot of teenagers are, a lot of teenage girls are, for many reasons. But I also felt this sort of sense of when I was modeling, like I could sort of play a character who was confident. And even though I still don't know much about fashion and certainly didn't know anything then, I loved the cameras and the escape, the performance. And so I was offered a contract to go model with one of the best agencies in the world right out of high school.
Wow.
So I took that. I moved to New York City. And it was like my second time out of Minnesota or something.
Yeah.
And it was culture shock that I totally wanted. Yeah. It was just like people were warning me, like, you're going to be so freaked out, blah, blah, blah. It was just like a movie. Like I walked out and I'm like, I've seen this before. And I was totally intimidated. My roommates, I thought, were just so hip and cool. They're from all over the world. And I felt like this gawky farmer girl. And but I was really committed and driven, and maybe too driven in some ways because as I think you know, I ended up developing a pretty severe eating disorder. But I was diagnosed with that when I was living in Paris. And then went back to Minnesota, thought I would like dabble in treatment. Like I'll get fixed in a couple of weeks. Right. And it's a much longer, more complex journey than that. And I did end up getting back into modeling once I got more stable in my wellness, and with the hopes and vision for acting, because through the healing process, I started to realize I had all this creative juice and I wanted some more meaning in my life. And I felt like I was kind of wasting it away. Like, what am I doing out here doing, like having my photo taken and disliking myself? Like, that's not a passion. And I'd lost all this ambition because I was just in this very self-destructive space. So as I healed, acting was such a beautiful therapeutic thing for me. Yeah. It was stronger than therapy. And I thought I found like my calling. And I was in Miami and I'd been modeling and took my first film TV acting class. And I just thought, this is it, and set my sights on LA. And then once I was able to, in my opinion, afford to move to Los Angeles, I made the jump. And it's been, I think, 10-ish years.
That's great.
Yeah.
That's great. It's, I mean, that's so interesting to one of the things that you said that really pinged my ear was about how the acting worked in conjunction with the help that you were seeking, and that it was just as, if not more, helpful in that way. Yeah. To help you, discover a path to wellness. Yeah, it really was. It was powerful because, again, there was this dissociation that I was experiencing, which I think a lot of people go through, especially if they've struggled with, because I was struggling with depression and body dysmorphia and all the things that come with that, and trying to, get to the root of all this stuff, and had been in a really kind of toxic relationship and all of these things. It's like it's too much to deal with. Yeah. And when I could, again, step into a character, I would do scenes and monologues. I could feel like I was dealing with these emotions, And I didn't realize it at the time, but I was so obsessed with the character study. And all my journals were like studying the characters and writing about the characters. And I think that I was kind of geared to be a writer. That was perfect training for writing. Like I was sitting in an acting class here in Los Angeles, and I had written a short film about my eating disorder experience, but fictionalized. And it actually got picked up it was optioned by a production company, which was amazing. Yeah. And I was excited, but then a beat later, I started to feel a little heartsick, and I couldn't figure out why. They took over the project, basically. Yeah. So I thought, well, is that just ego? Like, no, they're in charge. But it wasn't that. It was that I wanted to keep writing it. So that turned into my first novel, which is a thriller. And I realized I had this big aha moment that I'm a writer, and I'm just somebody who dives in. So I'm like screaming it from like a lot of people are like embarrassed they're writers. And I was like telling everyone on the street, like, hello, I'm a writer. And
before I was making even a dime at it, which took a little time.
Yeah.
But that's, again, just kind of how I function. So I started submitting myself to different publications. And first I created a free column. I pitched it to this magazine that had featured me as an actress. And I said, hey, remember me? I noticed you don't have a health and wellness section. Could I please write this to build up credits?
Yeah.
And so that was kind of the start of my health and sexuality writing career and led me to where I'm at.
That's fantastic.
Thank you.
So just that sense of feeling like I need to get my words out and I need to keep getting my words out.
Yeah. And to sustain
explore.
myself,
Yeah.
I've never bought into, I know that there's not a lot of predictability in artistic careers.
Yeah.
But I think there's a big problem that we've all been taught that it's not where you can make money. It's not a quote unquote real job. Now, I didn't get that from my parents, but I certainly, you can sense it in the world. Like my parents were always just like, do what makes you happy. And it's such a gift and it remains a gift. Yeah. But I just knew that, and again, kind of leaping too quickly sometimes, but I learned the hard way in some ways that you need to plan a little bit at least. But I have always been able to get up off my feet and like, if you really, really believe that you can thrive, you will.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. That energy and commitment of feeling like that's this. It was a tremendous motivator for me when I was sort of stuck in a market where we couldn't afford to get out of.
Yeah.
And just kind of feeling like not necessarily a failure. You look back over the things that I'd accomplished already, and I know that I'm not a failure. But at the moment I can't make rent and I'm selling DVDs to do that.
Yeah.
And not selling DVDs that I made, but DVDs that we bought and taking them to FYE and exchanging for cash and that kind of stuff. And that sort of humbling part of it, there is that sense of, I don't know.
It's like not being authentic or something.
Yeah, in a way. I feel like
feeling that way.
Yeah, this sense of, oh man, I suck and everybody's right about this path and that this path is fraught with challenges. But from the outside how hard this particular path is, and this is the nature of that hardness.
Yes.
So you got to walk through it.
Yes.
If you walk down, it's like the Sepulveda Pass. If you come over over the 405 down into the valley, you're going to go down into the valley. Yeah. And all that happens when you go down the valley is you notice how tall the mountain is. And you go, that mountain sure is tall, but you're not going to be able to recognize how tall it is unless you're at the bottom.
Yes, I love that. That is so perfect. And you get through it if you keep going.
You just keep going.
Yeah.
You figure it out. There's this, whether it's a safety net or whether it's hustle or being creative. And that's one of the things that helps you as a creative person is that you're brainstorming constantly. You're working through things and trying to figure out, oh man, well, this isn't working or I haven't booked something or I booked something and it just hasn't paid yet and I'm trying to get cover. Right. Whatever that situation is
there's no shame.
There's no shame in it. There can't be. The only shame is stopping.
Yes.
Stopping creating. Because if you're a creator, that's what you need to be doing.
It's so true. It's soul food. It's the emotional pay.
Yeah.
That has to, for me, I get sick if I'm not being creative and I'm not following my passions or seeking passions or living with desire for what I'm doing. And that's not, it's one of those things that it's a blessing and a curse sometimes because when you're that sensitive as so many artistic people are, it physically and mentally hurts to be in certain spaces. And so having, those temporary jobs or whatever it is to work your way out of too can be a huge blessing.
Absolutely.
To be like, this is for now. And later I'm going to tell great stories about this.
Right. Yeah. I'm going to learn more from doing this job. I got one of the greatest stories and life lessons and experience out of that time when I was in Cleveland. And it was probably, what I had said at the time, the worst job I'd ever had. And I was playing a coffee cup in front of a Dunkin' Donuts at 6:00 in the morning on Valentine's Day. It was in Cleveland, which tells you exactly how cold it was.
Oh, I do know.
Stand there in a thin foam coffee cup waving at traffic.
Oh.
And I'm standing there, and Sherry is standing there next to me as I'm waving at traffic to keep kids from throwing snowballs at me because I'm a costume character. And it was an hour and a half job, and I made $30 an hour, but it was for an hour and a half, and my agency got 20%. Oh, and we were just, it's like, this is what you do. Yeah. And I'm standing there. I remember saying to the lady, "What does this character say?" And she says, "Nothing. He is a genderless mute." So you're like, okay. I'm a member of SAG-AFTRA and Equity. I've been on the Second City main stage. I have performed in video games and movies. And I am now, today, a coffee cup waving at traffic.
A genderless mute coffee
And I'm a genderless mute. But I disregarded the note of being a genderless mute. And I was a very masculine coffee cup who recited lines.
That is like an indie film scene. That is really amazing.
Here's where the lesson was I turned to Sherry through this stupid face. No disrespect, of course, to the good people at Dunkin' Donuts and their corporate mascot, Cuppy. However, from the inside of that character, I said to Sherry through the googly eyes, this is the worst job that I've ever had. And I still get emotional about it because of what I learned in that moment. And it's made me a better performer because of it. I said that. This is the worst job I've ever had. And a car pulls up into Dunkin' Donuts, and this guy gets out with like his 3-year-old daughter, who runs over to me and puts her arm around me in front of a Dunkin' Donuts. And the guy goes, "Oh man, you just made her day. Come on, sweetie, let's go inside." Aww. And that was when I realized that just because Cuppy isn't my demographic, that I'm not interested in, and I'm not entertained by that, someone is. And my job as an actor, whether I'm entertaining millions of people in with a small role in a movie, or on a TV series for Netflix, or in a freaking parking lot outside of Dunkin' Donuts, if I'm an actor, I act and I perform for whoever is there.
That's beautiful.
And that, to me, that's helped me redefine the job, and that got me out of the place that I was in that market. And it helped me to motivate to grow and continue and not feel like either a failure or a struggling whatever. I take a great deal of inspiration from the movie The Untouchables, where Sean Connery says, "Mr. Ness, what are you prepared to do? Huh? He pulls a knife, you pull a gun. He puts one of yours in the hospital, you put one of his in the morgue. That's the Chicago. And prepared to do whatever the law will allow. And then what are you prepared to do? You're going to hit obstacles over and over and over again, and what defines you is how you either leap over or dig under or walk around or burst through."
Beautiful. That's amazing how much one experience like that can have such a powerful, and that it was an experience that you weren't enjoying, and that it's become this huge. I mean, that little girl was like an angel. That's that's pretty incredible.
So anyway.
I'm inspired.
Good. I'm glad.
That's beautiful.
Thank you. It was, it's tough, but we've, here you sit 10 years later going through stuff. And let me ask this question, because I'm very curious about the transition between, talk me through Girl Boner, the blog that you created in your writing process, and then in particular making the transition to podcasting and to hosting a show. Like, and we've talked about this before, but I think my audience would really enjoy to hear this, your story in that way.
Sure. So I was already working as a writer, health and sexuality both, and had written my novel, living here in Los Angeles. And I started a blog because my literary agent was like, "Start a blog." So, and I thought this is going to be horrible because like I wanted extra homework. That's what I thought. Like I'm doing this for free. No one's editing it. La, 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 la.
Right.
But I thought, I'm dedicated, going to do what I have to do. This is my career. I started blogging and really took to it and realized that I didn't have to stick to any particular topic. That's not really my personality.
Yeah.
So I just decided to write about whatever I wanted to. And sometimes it was about writing. Sometimes it was about wellness. Sometimes it was about my dog. It was just whatever I was thinking about at the time.
Yeah.
And I decided along the way, I had a few kind of awakenings or kind of those aha moments, because healing and growing, we're all on this whole discovery path. And the more I went along in my life, the more I realized how powerful embracing my sexuality had been. It really is what helped me heal from the eating disorder, which started as anorexia and was near fatal.
Wow.
And then went into, during recovery, which again is a whole process. I went through binge eating and all kinds of things. And it took me a good about 10 years. But the most powerful turning point was when I realized that I had not been sexually empowered and that there was shame around my sexuality. And then realizing that I was not like this sole unique case, that it's epidemic, especially for women, but for people in general in our culture.
Yeah.
And so as a writer and as a creative artist, we have our medium. And then for me, I've always turned to the arts to hopefully do some kind of good and whatever I believe in. And it gives me a real sense of purpose to be able to think that, maybe somebody might be either entertained or helped or whatever.
Yeah.
And so I knew that I had to do something. And I already had this blog going, and girl boner had been a term that was sort of like this inside joke for me for years and years, because in sex ed when I was a kid, you have like one class.
Yeah.
And which is like really not very helpful.
It's a unit, and it's the physical mechanics of sex, the physical mechanics of hygiene, and that's it.
Yeah, and a few little fear points about like, here's the disease you don't want to get. Here's the other gross disease, and you never want to use a public toilet seat, and basically don't get pregnant, and all these things.
Right.
So, but what I realized, we learned about male pleasure a little bit. We didn't learn anything about women's female pleasure, and so I had wondered, what about girl boners, since I was like 11, and I was always very curious. But I also knew that it was like this totally taboo thing. And I couldn't like run up to my teacher and be like, hey, what about my pleasure down in my vagina? That's not exactly something you can say. And so I just thought, until I actually became sexually active, I had no idea it was going to happen. Like, is it because I basically learned that men have pleasure and women are supposed to like, keep this from them.
Be the facilitator.
Be the facilitator only if you want to have a kid and after you're married, all these rules. Wow. So as I was writing and decided I'd do something with the term girl boner, I thought that has to be the name of my series. So I applied to trademark the term and then launched it as a blog series, thinking like, this will be a book someday. That's what I was thinking, because I'm a writer and that's what I would do. Yeah. But it very quickly took on a life of its own, and I realized that it was much more than that. And so it's become my brand, and my blog following was, I had good quality followers. I had wonderful people who were interactive and supportive, and they still are, and I'm so grateful. And those are the most important connections for me, I think. Yeah. But it just took it gave my stats a girl boner. I started to get so many people listening, and not only listening, or not listening yet, reading and following along and contacting me on social media and emailing me privately and saying, oh my God, me too. How come I never knew this? Wow. And so I was starting to, it's funny because I actually sat down with a publicist at a conference, and she asked me about my 5-year plan. And I'm just sort of like very in the moment, and here I go. Like, there's my direction. And so I did not have a 5-year plan. I had like a 2-day plan. And so I'm like, I'm at this conference, and then I'm at this conference. So
right. And once I get home, I don't know what. I'll probably have, it depends. My flight lands around 10:30, so I think it'll be a bedtime snack.
Maybe a muffin. Yeah, that's not exactly what she was asking. So I just made up stuff. I sat down and I thought, well, what would I really like to have happen? Yeah. So I thought I would like to, in the next year, I said I would like to appear on 5 radio shows. And it was really interesting because I don't know if this is like the power of attraction or just how things were rolling, and it just coincidentally happened at this time. Yeah. But a week later, I had a phone call, and somebody I'd met at a conference had a radio show and wanted me to appear. Very quickly after, I had 3 more appearances. And these were all, I didn't reach out for these. I didn't ask for them. They asked me. Wow. And the fourth one was Dr. Lisa Masterson, who has a show here at Global Voice Broadcasting called Health and Heals, which is fabulous. And she's a gynecologist, and she was on the TV show The Doctors for a while. I interviewed her for an article, and her publicist asked me if I would come in and be on her new podcast. And I was like, awesome. So that was my 4th interview. My 5th was my show, because after I left here and I'm like on cloud 9, like we were just talking, we love this space so much and we have such a great time. And when her publicist called me and said, hey, have you ever thought about having your own show? Like, have you thought about it? And like, I'm like, oh my God, I need my own show. Yeah. And that was it.
That's fantastic.
Thank you.
I had a similar experience of coming here and doing, I think it was the Young Actors Theater Camp with John Ainsworth, who was one of my students at Second City.
Nice.
And I came in and sat where you're sitting right now and did it, and then left after meeting Gabe. Was like,
addiction.
I wonder. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a wonderful experience.
It is. And it's just so special and intimate, and I think that if it's something that is in you to do, when you get a taste of it, you really long for it. And it's such a beautiful way to cultivate conversations, and it has a beautiful intimacy about it.
It really, truly does. Well, what was your process for not only in terms of the nuts and bolts preparation for doing a show, but like how did you get to a place where you were, there's I mean, since the focus of my particular show as a conversation piece is let's talk voiceover work, but in particular, what I'm really interested about with your dynamic is not only the fact that you have a background in theater and that you are a writer too, that there was a calling at that moment to like I want to pursue this. So what was your process of making that from your 4th appearance on radio to 5th to procuring the space and then putting the show together? And how does someone do it, but what was your path?
How did I do it? That's a great question. So after I had that phone call, I pretty much knew, like instinctually, this is something I want to do. Yeah. But then there's like the logistics of it, right?
Yes.
I was thinking, I knew for sure I would not be one of those people who would, which I think it's great if you can do your own podcast from your house and you know how to do all the technical stuff and you're cool with that. That was just not in me. I thought if I'm going to do all that stuff, I probably won't ever do it.
That's it. And I feel like a lot of challenges, the biggest challenge I felt too is if I went down that road, I would not sustain it. I would do maybe 5 or 6 episodes and might never post anything, and then it would taper off.
Yeah. Or you get stuck on something technically and you just kind of like give up and it's just frustrating and I loved the experience of coming in here so much too. I think there's a magic about being in the studio and not having like there are wonderful podcasts that are very, very edited, and I think that's great. But for me, I wanted something more candid where we just sit down and we talk and we get in and people feel like they're here with us. And so I knew that there was no question I wanted to do it here. Yes. So then it was like, there are fees involved and all this stuff. So then I'm thinking, how much can I afford right now? And, it's very reasonably priced here, but it's also when you're committing to something that's going to be, you want to make sure that the investment is wise and how are you doing this and blah, blah, blah. Right. So at first I thought I was going to do 2 a month. I thought I'm going to try 2 a month, really put my all into it and then see. Like, I don't know. Are people going to listen? I think I'm going to love it, but who knows? But after the first one, I was like, I think I just need to come back again tomorrow. I didn't, but I never stopped though. Like I actually took a very like grown up step and took off a week for Christmas, and but I barely ever miss, and it's become such a passion. So the actual first episode, I decided it would make a lot of sense for it just to be me to like introduce the show, and I decided to tell the story that inspired Girl Boner, which was how I started my blog series as well. Because the nice thing about having the blog series was I already had somewhat of an audience who I hoped would listen, but I also knew what topics tended to be most interesting to them, because on the blog they reply more. Because I write about sexuality, they're still very hush-hush for the most part. Like some are vocal, but some just talk to me privately, and that's okay. But I can see which posts were the most popular, what was kind of like hitting a nerve with people in a good way. So I started, and beyond the first episode, I didn't know what I was going to do next, but I was comfortable with that. Like that was okay with me. Some people plan out many episodes in advance, and that's great too. But for me, the style, I like to feel like really fresh. And now I book ahead. But I started out, so I think my second episode was one of my most popular topics again. And then I had like my first guest come in, and I didn't actually know. I'd interviewed people a lot, and I still do, for articles. Yeah. But I had never done this, like interviewing someone in the studio. So my first guest was actually a friend of mine who is a professional matchmaker.
Oh, wow.
And I thought that's a good one, because she's coming in, we're like pals, and it was so fun. And I just thought, this is just flowing well. So that's kind of the process. And then now people reach out to me a lot more. Like over time, that's just naturally what generally happens, is people start pitching show ideas to you, and some I take and some I don't. But I really try to stay true to the message and think like, what is the most powerful, empowering topic? What I try not to, even though I have had a wonderful time interviewing some celebrities, I also really want to always have space and treasure the voices of the quote unquote everyday woman.
Yeah.
So the variety is important to me.
Yeah. It's one of the things that I really appreciate about your show is not only the diversity of topics but like just the honesty and the challenges that folks face. And the episode I was listening to yesterday, I think is the most recent episode where you posted about the person who's on their journey with their daughter and oh man, I'm sorry.
Was it the pelvic health?
No, it was the gender neutral bathrooms.
Oh, yes. Casey Brown.
That's right.
I love Casey. Yes. That was really important to me because there have been these bathroom bills lately.
Yeah.
So sometimes they're news related, things that come up.
Yeah.
But I especially love it when there's a topic that is somewhat controversial, not because of the controversy, but because I feel like there needs to be education from the people who are dealing with it.
Yeah.
Because we hear the headlines, but like, what is it really like to be that person?
Exactly. And how can I be a better neighbor to that person
Yes.
in a way where it's like, okay, I want you to be you.
Yes.
So what things can I do to help you be a better, like I was talking earlier about being all nationalistic as an American holding my passport and being like, how can I make things a little bit more comfortable without standing in judgment because I don't understand you or because I'm ignorant to you because I've never encountered someone who is dealing with that particular situation.
Yes, absolutely. To be an ally and to really be supportive. And I think you're so right. It's about fear and not knowing. And people just don't know. And there's so much stigma around talking about this stuff. And there just shouldn't be. And one thing I've learned, and very quickly Girl Boner taught me, that when you start the conversation, people will join in.
Yeah.
So that has been the biggest blessing, I think. And, it's a challenge too, because I, again, am used to, as a writer, I get to refine things, and my articles go to editors and my books went to editors.
Right.
And when you're in the studio and just talking, it's totally different. And so it's been a lesson in perfectionism and going, it's okay to say, now and then. You're a human, or maybe you didn't ask the question the way you wanted to. Who cares? It's more organic and people will, you don't need to be so hard on yourself.
I agree. I do feel like I've been listening to a lot of different shows and paying way more attention to podcasting than I had before. And, you know what? I'm going to, speaking of podcasting and people, I want to take a moment real quick to share something and then come back to this because I can see this going in a different direction. But I do want to take a moment to share something that's become already a very, very popular part of the show. And again, thank you so much for your suggestion about it when we had a conversation about ways of doing this. But it's our friends at Bookable have provided pro tips. And this week's pro tip is courtesy of Bookable VO. And here is Rick to share a pro tip for all of you. So here it is.
Hey, this is Rick Wasserman from Bookable Voiceover Coaching and Demos with another tip. I think there's an important distinction between your voice and your read. For me, your voice is the sound that you make with your instrument, meaning your lungs, teeth, tongue, vocal cords, breath control. It's the technical sound that comes out of your mouth. Your read is something different. Your read includes your voice, but it also includes everything that makes up who you are. Your opinions, your sense of humor, your eccentricities, your regionalisms, your musicality, all the things that make you, you. You could have identical twins that have identical voices, but they have completely different reads. Why? Because they have completely different personalities. So when you're auditioning for a voiceover or putting together your demo, don't worry so much about making sure your voice is heard. What we want to hear is your read.
That was Rick Wasserman with Bookable VO. And, of course, you can check him out for both coaching and for demos at bookablevo.com. Thanks again, guys. And thank you, Rick, for that. And thanks again to August for joining. Like you're joining in the middle. Like if you've downloaded this podcast and you've just skipped ahead to 39 minutes to like, oh, let's see what's going on joining. Well, so welcome back.
Well, thank you.
No, what was interesting to me was I had SiriusXM and was listening to primarily kept it to listen to comedy and Howard Stern. And I really enjoyed his show, but he was throwing a lot of shade on podcasting, and it was kind of like, well, all right, that's fine. But I was kind of ignorant about it. And a good friend of mine, who is a music director at Second City, a guy named Chad Kruger, is now the producer of The Hooray Show. And it was the first sort of podcast that I started to listen to with any regularity. And I was like, this is so much fun. There's so much freedom and space. And yeah, it's not being broadcast on KABC, but who cares?
There's real benefits to that.
Yeah.
There really is. I mean, we have so much freedom. First of all, I would get kicked off a lot of networks, even though my show is really clean.
Yes.
Because there is still stigma and taboo, and there's certain places that would say, oh, you said sex or whatever. Right. But also, we are in control of, like, you can provide quality tips instead of having like an ad every 5 minutes or, and I think there's beauty in both. And I really respect kind of traditional, radio and stuff like that. But I feel like it's on-demand radio, basically. I mean, it's on demand, but it's something more, because I really do feel like people get to feel like they're part of it.
Yes, I agree. The specialized nature of it, that if you're interested, like if you are someone who's interested in either VO or audiobooks or whatever, or you just link into the personality of who's talking and you just completely jump on board. Yeah. I was talking to my brother yesterday, and he listens to, I was loading the name into, it's a show called You Made It Weird. And the podcast, and he talks to all kinds of folks, and it's not Mike Kaplan. It'll come to me later. I'll put it in the postscript. But like this, it's exciting to be a part of it and to be a voice in it.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I think we're so lucky. It's such an exciting time, I think there's so much freedom and so much opportunity, and it's growing. I think, people sit in their cars in traffic and listen or working out. I actually listen to podcasts at the gym pretty often.
I do too.
It's so fun. And it's like makes it so much more enjoyable.
Yeah, it really truly does. Mm-hmm. Well, what were some of the challenges that you ran into as you were in the process of kind of developing your show and the run that you've had so far? What were some of the those barriers that you have to jump over or crawl through?
Yeah, my Sepulveda.
Yeah.
Well, first of all, iTunes rejected my cover art for a while, and we had a really hard time getting that approved.
Really?
And it's interesting because my original logo, and I still use it for some things, but it's basically like a woman's midsection, but there's a big heart where her underwear would be.
Okay.
You can't see anything underneath the heart.
Yeah.
And it says girl boner on it, but it's obviously a crotch, right?
Right.
So I think it's kind of brilliant. I love it, but a little biased. But iTunes apparently thought that was too vulgar. Whereas when I went to their health and fitness section, there are so many images of women, very scantily clad, almost pornographic looking images. Great that they have the freedom to do that. But as soon as you put it into the context of women's sexuality, I've had that block along the way in my path, which is kind of affirming, because I'm like, okay, I had this decision to make. I can either fight with iTunes or I can get my freaking show on there. So I just decided, and Gabe said, why don't we just use your face, and we just put the heart from the girl boner, which turned out great because I can use that for many things. And it's, as the host, it's kind of nice. It gives it a personal feel, and it's fine. The goal was to get the show out there.
Yeah.
So that was a big, big challenge. And then, starting to secure sponsorships, that was a big learning curve for me. Mm-hmm. But I think it's really important for anyone listening who has any kind of show or blog or whatever, if you're thinking, I could never have sponsorship, you have to think outside the box, like we were talking about. And I think there are so many ways for creatives to make money doing what they do, having your podcast, whatever it is, that are not kind of the conventional things. And you just take that creativity you use in your daily life and go, hey, how can I use this to actually make it fun for me to get somebody to jump on board who I can support and work with? And that brought challenges too, because, one relationship that I had with a sponsor didn't go very well. I learned from it. I moved on. No bad blood, it's okay. And then actually asking people to invest in me. That was probably the hardest thing.
What was the challenge of that?
It's funny. I think that throughout all of my healing that I did with my body and my sexuality and my self-acceptance, I hadn't really dipped into the financial part of that. And I don't think that they're totally separable. Like if you have this major challenge embracing yourself as a person, it's going to affect your finances. Like I think that you can't compartmentalize that much. And I had been. So I didn't realize that I had some of these lingering attitudes, kind of that money was maybe negative. Like I used to always say, I'm not really a money person. Like I don't really care about the money. Yeah. Almost as though that made me a better person somehow.
And I feel like our values too are like, especially growing up, like you mentioned, like your grandfather was a pastor, they were missionaries, and that, you know, I mean, I grew up in the Calvinist tradition. And it's very, while finances is part of it and that you take care of your business, it's also like, well, you're not just going to be about the money, are you?
Yes.
You're not just about the money. Shame on you. There are things more important than money. So that there's, and it's the root of all evil and all these other parts. Mm-hmm. So that we do in a way, especially given our tradition, try to divorce ourselves from that notion.
Yes.
And I know I'm much more quick to give something away than try to sell it.
Yes.
You know, and I'm fine with it because I'm making money elsewhere and it's not out of necessity. But there is that sense of, I feel like I'm doing my duty of being a good covenant youth by not.
Yeah, totally. You know? I think that, that's definitely part of it. We're kind of like groomed to see, you know, financial wealth as a sinful thing, sort of. So, I really had to examine my attitudes, and I realized that I love to give too, and I can give more if I make more, and I can build my company more if I have people invest in me. And what helps me the most probably is, instead of thinking, I need to ask this person to give me money, you know, invest in me, I think of the people I want to help. And I think of the people who write to me and tell me their really, really, really dark stories, who are really lost right now and who, you know, need help. And knowing that as I build, that gives me power and more freedom to do more good. That really helps. That, and just jumping in and doing it. Because like the first call I had with a potential sponsor, I almost peed my pants. I was so nervous. Like it was the most nervous I've been in I don't even know how long. Yeah. But you get through it, and then it's easier the next time.
Yeah. Oh, that's cool. Yeah. I felt that too.
Yeah, it's scary, right?
It is.
At first,
because you're putting it out there, and you feel there's that sense of I'm gonna put my hand out. There's this stupid line from an Indiana Jones movie. I think. Or it's Patriot Games, where Harrison Ford says, "I'm not coming in here with my hat in my hand." And there's such contempt for that notion, and I use that phrase all the time. And I feel like there's an element of standing there turning a hat. I was wondering if I might be able to have a conversation about the possibility of you working with me. You know, like this this supplication versus coming at it of like I have a value add, and I want to invite you to share in that. Yes,
exactly. Exactly. Let's collaborate, you know, let's partner and take what you're doing that's awesome and what I'm doing that's awesome and do more awesome.
Better, make more awesome. That's right. And that's what's been really great about this relationship with Bookable, is that I feel like, you know, what Rick and Greg have shared has been a wonderful extra value beyond being a guest.
Yes. And that's exactly how I feel. I have Dr. Megan Fleming is my resident expert sexologist. She's a therapist, a psychologist, and she takes a question from a listener every week. Which
that's great.
I can give my take, but I'm not a psychologist. I give my own opinion. But it's so nice to have somebody who is working with couples every single day. Yeah. And then the Pleasure Chest is my newer product company sponsor. Great. And they're fantastic. And I believe in them so much that when I talk about them, I get so freaking excited, because they were like one of the first companies to really be inclusive for all gender identities and sexual orientations. And they educate and they provide free workshops all over the country. So it's, you know, and saying no has been powerful too. Like I've had sponsorship requests from some companies that are not in line with my values. Yeah. And it's really important for, I think, and this applies to life in general, but if it doesn't sit right in your gut, there's a reason, you know, and there's some real power in saying, you know what, I value what is happening here too much to take that. Because again, it's not like we shouldn't be desperate for the money, right? You know, come from a place of this is my gift that I'm cultivating that I would love to work with somebody like-minded with. Yes. And if you're somebody that could potentially hurt that, or your products could potentially hurt my listeners, then there's an emotional cost, and I'm not going there.
Yeah. Well, good for you. I think that's important. You know, when you defining the scope of your of what the topic is, and in particular, what's motivating the topic. It's not just topic. Mm-hmm. It's not just, for me, it's not just voiceover. So everything associated with voiceover, I will absolutely allow to participate. Right. I want someone who's like-minded in focus and in wellness and helpfulness and growing and positivity and energy, and very much it's sorry, but like the image in my head is Gaston from Ratatouille, the Pixar, where it says everybody can cook, and I believe that about this. I think everybody's point of view is unique and interesting, and if you have a passion to share it, then you should, even if it's with someone else, or if you have that's the nature of sharing, is with someone else. But you know what I mean? Like if you so grab a microphone, get a USB mic, plug it into a laptop, sit down with your brother or your sister or your neighbor and share. I want to hear veteran stories. I want to hear stories.
Yes. Stories are one of the most powerful tools I think we have in this world.
Yeah.
Historically, that's how we've learned everything. And it's so important. And not everyone, wants to sit down at the mic per se, but like you said, you can talk to a friend, you can journal about it, you can paint about it, you can sing about it. But letting things out. And that's something that whole path, like talking about the acting, you have to deal in some way and expressing, and really, sometimes I think our creativity is much more willing to spill out than our real selves when we're feeling a little lost,
Yes.
So it's important to let yourself, however it is that works for you.
Man, I just like with my daughter lately, it's been interesting. She's really taken to drawing, and we bought her some like manga books, or manga. I don't know exactly how to pronounce that correctly, but like books of how to do that stuff. And then I've taken to sitting down with her and doing drawing. Yeah. And, and not getting twisted up about how good the drawing is.
Yeah.
But just to do it. And like discovering if you take at Disney California Adventure, there's the animation studio experience, and you go in there and they teach you how to draw one of the characters. Okay. And the guy who's drawing there's no erasers in there, and that's on purpose.
Ooh.
So that it's like you take this big old pencil, that like a kindergarten pencil, and and then you just make a ton of really light circles. And then when you find the right circle, that's the one you draw in hard. That's the one you keep. And that idea, to me, is really profound in terms of all creative endeavors.
Yeah.
Just lightly draw but a bunch.
Yeah.
And give yourself room to make mistakes, and nothing is permanent. Just build it and trust that if you explore, you will find the right path. But you got to be open to creating a lot of different options.
Yeah, not stopping yourself when you feel like you failed.
Right.
That's huge. What a beautiful message. I think also what you just said about doing something that you don't have any sort of like expectation from is so important. I think it's important for everyone, but especially creatives who have some sense of creativity in their main work.
Yeah.
To have creative outlets that are not about work.
Yes.
Like I'll sing and play guitar, or, stuff that's not, I'm not doing this to try to, build my brand or to reach more people.
Right.
But just to be. I think it's really important.
I do too. Even just I think as the take home that I've gotten out of every time where I've been at the lowest point has been just to find inspiration in something. I remember in Cleveland during that time, there was a DVD that came out of the collected music videos of Mark Romanek, who is a filmmaker who made the film 1 Hour Photo with Robin Williams. Ooh. Brilliant film.
Yeah, I loved it.
But his music videos, he did a bunch of stuff with the Red Hot Chili Peppers, and there's this one video called Can't Stop, and it's all inspired by 1-minute sculptures by this artist. And they had a bunch of props, like a big purple hippo head, and they're in a big white studio with pens and Lego bricks and just all kinds of madness. And he just let them go, and they're playing the music, and then they're sitting in giant dumpsters. And it's just, and then they're like, there's one bit where Anthony is sticking as many pens as he possibly can into every orifice of Flea. And it's hilarious.
Yeah.
It's just hilarious. But that crazy little music video reminded me that it doesn't have to be good. It just has to be created. It just needs to be.
I love that.
Bring it out.
Yeah.
And I remember I wrote him a fan email. I was like, I just so you know, thank you. That was really helpful. And I ended up getting to work with him in a commercial here when I got to Los Angeles.
That's
I didn't even know it
crazy.
was Mark Romanek until I looked it up on iSpot. I was like, oh my God. Oh no. I worked with him. I didn't know. He directed me. Oh my God.
That's amazing.
And for the launch of Call of Duty Ghosts, like the trailer for this video game. Yeah.
That's amazing.
But I don't know. I love, I love your story and your your commitment to wellness and sharing your journey and helping other people find their, good place and being, even if it's just one stretch of support to help someone get on the rising action of their life. And that this is your medium in conjunction with your writing to do that. I think it's wonderful and it's exciting to be a part of. But I just after listening to a couple episodes already, I've just been so thrilled by what you're doing.
Thank you.
And I've learned a great deal too. Is like because that was one of the concerns I had. Is like I'm a male, and
yeah,
like that doesn't disqualify me from learning.
No. I love that all genders listen to my show.
Yeah,
and occasionally I hear from a man who will kind of hush hush, like it's okay. Listen to this, right? Like I love it. Like my tagline is where good girls go for sexual empowerment. So I think sometimes they're like I wasn't invited, but actually it's for everyone.
Yeah.
The good girl part comes from the fact that I grew up like a good girl, you know, and I was rebellious, but only for like good causes. So it was never like ed sex was never really considered one of those. Yeah. And so good was never paired with. So I think anybody who cares about women's sexuality or just living a full life, and not all of my topics are specifically to do with sex. It's everything. It's about arousing your whole life, and sexuality is a big, big theme. But yeah, I love that you can relate and feel like there's some takeaways for you. That's important to me.
And as a husband and a father of a little girl, I want to be able to raise her with a healthy attitude about herself.
Yeah.
I think there's a real value in that. And,
huge. Yeah, dads play a huge role in how girls grow up feeling about themselves and their bodies. And I think that, unfortunately, our culture has somewhat, for all kinds of complex reasons, not been as welcoming for men in that conversation. So I think it's really important and wonderful that you're open to that and that it's on your radar. That's just a big – because I think a lot of times it's just parents don't want to think about their kids ever being sexual. But it's like they were born sexual creatures. It doesn't mean they're going to have sex when they're little, but it just means that that's part of their beautiful bodies and their beautiful selves. And when they have questions, answer them and don't shame them. And that's it. Be there. Open communication.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, we say all the time, I'm not raising a kid, I'm raising an adult.
I like that.
And, and this is part of it. Yeah. And, and I mean, my parents did exactly what to the best of their ability, what they need to do. And my mom was very, very open and, but it was still like when I was the first one in our family to go through puberty. I was the first one to begin to express interest in sexuality and that kind of stuff. And then you're bumping up against the puritanical morality versus being a very visual person, and visual stimulus is what was really what it was all about for me. Yeah. That like not being able to have access to those things because it was the mid 80s. So
which makes you want it more.
Which makes you want it more. And so it's like I had my little stash of Playboys and then I'd go away to summer camp or something and come back and my little stash of Playboys was gone. And it was, it was, and all it really served to do was just kind of enrage you a little bit of like it's a violation of privacy and that's my own stuff and whether it's contraband or not. Holy cow, it's like the one thing I'm doing. You know what I mean?
And suggesting that that's bad. Suggesting that it's bad that you're curious and want to see. And now, and actually my topic for my show today is porn versus real sex, like what we learn, because now kids as young as 4 and 5 years old are seeing porn on their phones and their smart devices and whatever, the computer.
Unlimited access.
It's unlimited, and they're not learning it other places. So of course, that's where they're going to go. It's easy access. So it's an important conversation, and I think most parents do the best they can, and they weren't taught much either. So what are they supposed to say?
I mean, my parents had a very healthy attitude about it, and I remember right before I got married, my dad gave me a packet that was like, information, but it wasn't, it was mechanical. It was stuff that I already understood. And then there are things about women that I didn't understand. And I know that as a partner and as a husband and all those things, I want to please my wife. You know what I mean? So I feel like
that's still missing out of the conversation. It really is. Yeah. Like our sex ed talks about for girls now, they talk about the internal sex organs as though like the clitoris doesn't even exist really. Like it might be on a chart, but it's not. That thing is like pleasure powerhouse and the way that most women climax. And so to not know that about yourself, and while boys are much more kind of, boys will be boys, they say. They're going to be sexual and they're very interested, and that's normal. But for girls, not so much. And so it's really interesting. We have a long way to go. But that's another reason that podcasting is so great, because there are actually a lot of sexuality podcasts out there and sex educators who are out there. And I think there's a lot of clinicians who sometimes it's more technical, sometimes it's woven into stories and whatnot. And I like to be the in-between thing, know? Yeah.
I love that. And I love also, like, both of us have mentioned the variety of voices that are out there in this discussion in the podcast world, and that your uniqueness is what makes it special.
Yeah.
And in VO, it's like what Rick was just saying too, about like your voice versus your read, how you interpret what's you and what's needed. And I just had a conversation yesterday with someone specifically about that, about like, just because other people are doing it, we put so much value on the originals.
Yeah.
And not like, I know that I'm not the first guy to do a voiceover podcast, but I'm the only guy to do a voiceover podcast that sounds like all over voiceover.
Yeah.
Yeah,
and you bring your uniqueness. It's so true. Like I didn't listen to any sexuality podcast at all before starting my show.
Yeah.
Because I didn't want them to. I had a vision, and I knew that for my show I wanted like a kind of an official start to it.
Yes.
Like I often have like quotes or stats at the beginning. I wanted like certain pieces, and I could see it and feel it. And I knew that because I was so new, that insecurity could have me comparing and all this stuff.
Sure.
And I'm really glad I didn't listen to those then, because I'm completely different. And now it's interesting because every once in a while I have to remind myself that it's great that I'm different. But there are times when, as you move along, you get to sort of this, they call it in writing, they call it the muddy middle of the novel, where you're writing and the beginning, you're really excited. The ending's really exciting, the climax, but there's like this muddy middle part where you're like, I can't make this interesting, or you get kind of stuck. You don't know where the plot's going to go.
Yeah.
And the same thing with the career path of a podcast. I think it's really exciting at first and you're totally ignorant because you're new.
Yes.
So you're like, woo, this is exciting. You're running at a high. And then as you start moving forward and gaining more clout, get to, there's a little bit more kind of pressure to be good, for example.
Yeah.
There's more people listening. There's more people watching. There's more people critiquing you, and you will hear some harsh criticism and all that. And so I've had to, at certain times, just kind of remind myself, like, this is where you're supposed to be. You don't have to, don't get compare yourself syndrome.
Right.
Step away, go out in nature, hike it off.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
Value the people who enjoy what you have to say. And if people are not tuning into this, who cares?
It's not your target audience.
It's not your target audience.
Yeah.
They don't care in what you have to say, and that's fine.
Yeah. There's something else for them.
That's right. Go find it.
Yeah, it's really
true.
true.
For those who do, and those who now are interested in finding out more about what you're doing with Girl Boner, tell my audience audience how they can find you and listen to your show and read your blog and follow you on Twitter and stuff like that.
Thank you. Sure. Well, my website is augustmclaughlin.com. And the easiest way to spell that is augustmcmc and then laugh, LAUGHLIN.com. And you can find everything there. There's the link to the podcast on iTunes. I do show extras every week. And then I have a mailing list. And I actually just added a fun new gift. It's a guided audio meditation that I recorded here. So if they sign up for my mailing list, they get extras every month, and they get this free gift just emailed to them, and you can just download it on your phone. It's less than 3 minutes.
That's awesome.
And it's a self-love, self-embracement type of meditation. So it's totally rated G. It's great for kids too.
Fantastic.
And then, I'm on all the social media places. The Facebook page is mygirlboner.com. So Facebook.com/mygirlboner.com. And on Twitter, it's my name. But my name is like one letter too long. So it says Auguste McLaughlin. But you can find me. Just Google #girlboner and I pop up everywhere.
And can I just say also, in terms of the artwork that you wound up choosing for iTunes and stuff, I really like it. I like it. I like in particular the expression on your face in that it feels like it tells me what the tone of your show is. That it's aspirational and that it's light and that it's fun and that it's accessible. I found that there it is.
Thank you.
I'm glad. I'm sorry that iTunes put you through that, but I'm very happy for you where you wound out. That the outcome is what it is, because I do feel like it matches the show very, very well, and
good.
that there's a brightness to it that I really enjoy. So I encourage everyone to check out your show.
Thank you. I'm so happy to hear that. I actually had a friend tell me that in my signature on my emails, she said, you should really have your face in there instead of a big girl boner crotch. Because sometimes I have to remind myself that not everybody talks about sex like they're talking about the weather. Right. Which is kind of how I feel. Yeah. So I have to tone myself down and be like, okay, I'll be here's my nice face. Now let's talk about sex in private.
Right. I like how you whisper in private into the microphone. Yeah. Because this is actually where it belongs.
Yes, it's so true.
Awesome. August, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thanks for having me. It was a blast.
Had a wonderful time. And also thank you to Bookable Voice Coaching and Demos. You can find them at bookablevo.com. And you can find me right here, right now, a week from the future, doing a brand new show, a brand new episode of All Over Voiceover with Kiff VH. Thanks again so much for joining me. Mies is, it's a new pronoun for us.
I like it.
Thank you very much. Take care, you guys. This has been All Over Voiceover with Kiff VH. Thank you so much for listening. If you enjoyed the show, please go to iTunes and give us a positive rating. It truly helps. Follow me on Twitter @KiffVH or on Instagram @KiffVH or on Vero @KiffVH. Thanks so much for listening. Talk to you soon. Claim victory and depart the field.
Werewolf?
Yeah.